What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Today, I have no set agenda, right? So just a precaution. Like, I'm not going to be talking about anything MMA specific. We might drift in that direction and shit, but I'm really just going to be bullshitting about, like, honestly, myself and how I got started in Jiu Jitsu and, like, kind of my journey through it so far and getting transitioned into teaching and stuff like that. And just hopefully it adds a little bit of context as to why I have this MMA channel and, like, this, like, thing where I focus on fights and stuff like that. And like, even though I practice jiu-jitsu more regularly, it's like in terms of spectatorship, the UFC and MMA is just so much more exciting. Like there's no denying it in my opinion, as opposed to like watching professional jiu-jitsu, right? So anyway, my point is just that like when I started this channel, it was really because I felt like I had watched so much UFC and I had started really thinking about it from a technical perspective as opposed to just being a fan. Like I would just kind of watch UFC naively at first when I started. And I started back in like high school probably. I would say like eighth, ninth grade, I really don't know. But anyway, like I remember Rampage was really big at the time. Like he was my first favorite fighter. I remember seeing highlights of him doing the fucking triangle slam and shit. And then he knocked out Chuck Liddell and I was like, oh, this is the guy, right? And I was so upset when he lost to Lyoto Machida. So I viewed it from a real fan's perspective in the sense that like when I watch the Eagles play, I want the fucking Eagles to win. That is what I started doing with fighters. I fucking love Chael Sonnen and I love Frankie Edgar. And honestly, I loved Conor McGregor too. And you guys will still hear in like the way that I don't like necessarily who he's become in some of his action sense, but when Conor was on the come up, he was fucking funny. And it wasn't the same kind of like the way he talked to like Dustin Poirier, like calling him a pea head and stuff like that. Like that shit is funny. Like I like Conor a lot, right? I like people who talked. I love Chael. I also really admired people like Cowboy. But my point is that I would pick these favorites and I would root for them to win. And if they didn't, I would get upset. And anyway, one of my favorite fighters, Frankie Edgar. And the reason for this too is because Frankie was a fucking dog. Like when you saw his highlights, you were like, oh shit, this guy is crazy. His cardio is insane. No denying his heart, like his fights against Gray Man, all the shit, right? So when I was in college, I went to Clarion University. And that's where Frankie Edgar had wrestled, right? And he was coming back to do a seminar at a place called Clarion MMA, which I had tried a class there like a year before this, earlier in college. And it's just like a blip on the radar, though. Like I took it, I was there for a week, I don't remember much about it, and then I just kind of immediately fell off. Maybe it was 2 weeks, I don't know. It could have been like longer, shorter. I really don't know. But I didn't really take it seriously, kind of fell off. But like a year after trying that or so, these are all estimations. I don't know a fucking exact timeline. I just remember Frankie Edgar came in to do a seminar at this place. And I saw it on social media or something. And he was also doing a meet and greet at a car dealership afterwards. So I was like, my friends were like, we had just gotten my one friend into the UFC. And then my one friend had watched the UFC consistently. And he had gone to Vegas, met all these fighters and shit. Like my friend Brad. And we were like, all right, let's go meet Frankie at this car dealership. And I thought there would be like a line. There was nobody. There was not a soul. And we got to just go up and talk to him. And of course, I'm like all nervous, asking him like stupid questions like, are you ready for your fight? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to like fuck him up. He was getting ready for his BJ Penn fight, the third BJ Penn fight. So I remember thinking after leaving that meet and greet, like, fuck, I fucked up an opportunity to really just sit and talk to this guy who's probably just a normal, like, dude, he seems down to earth, right? And I didn't ask him much other than these like stiff questions. And then too, I was like, damn, I regret not just at least being there to witness what that fucking like seminar was like. And this is where I started thinking about it, right? And it got like the seed got planted. And I remember I watched his fight against like Cub Swanson later. And I was like, damn, I'm a fan of the sport, but I don't really know what's going on. So I show up to Clarion MMA, not really knowing what to expect. And when I'm there, when I walked in, I remember not even fucking thinking, like, I don't even know what a gi is. I don't even know what I have to be prepared for. I probably came in just basic athletic clothes. I was like, what in the fuck am I, like, getting into, really? Because, like, I didn't know if I had, like, a specific direction I was going to take. I was like, I'm just here to learn MMA. I'm not here to, like, really fight. I'm just here to, like, start learning about this thing, right? And then I took a jiu-jitsu class. And I remember, I think I took a couple of them and I was like, this is fun. There's a lot to like it was very addicting right away. But the day that I really got hooked on it, right? Okay, the owner was a purple belt at the time, and you want to talk about like self-made, like him and his wife, and I believe they're separated now, unfortunately. I don't know what happened there, but like their names were Leo and Hilary LaFay, and I believe they were both purple belts when I started there, and they were under Jean-Jacques Machado at the time, and they really just came up watching DVDs and stuff, and like watching all these techniques and practicing them, and then eventually gaining this affiliation with them. And they ran this small gym, and they had a son who was 15 at the time, named Mikey. Their other son was younger. His name's Haven. Anyway, I remember being like, I want to roll with somebody, and you guys don't like take it easy on me. Like, show me, like, and Leo was like, Mikey, roll with him. And I was like, all right, here we go. Like, I'm like young. Like, I had gotten a taste of what Jiu Jitsu was about, but not really. And I was like, here we go. I'm like 190 pounds. Like, I'm lifting all the time. Like, I'm like, I think I can compensate for some of this because I'm strong, and this kid's 15 and he's like 140 pounds soaking wet. I was like, all right, here we go. And he choked me out in like 10 seconds. Like immediately sliced through my guard, got around to my back, and like sunk in a rear naked choke immediately. And I was like, oh, fuck, I have to figure out how to not let that happen to me. And I was baffled that somebody so small, regardless of the fact that he was quick, like I knew he would be quicker than me just by like watching him train and stuff like that and just watching him move, and he's small, right? But I had no idea how to defend myself at any point during what he was doing. And I remember rolling with him later and him just like laughing his way and talking his way through positions and stuff. And I was like, this is fucking crazy. Like, this is crazy that I'm not able to do anything to him, and he's just having a conversation with me while I roll with him. I think Mikey's a purple belt now, competes actively, and he does very well when he competes, right? Anyway, Leo and Hilary actually just like a week or so ago got promoted to black belt. They switched affiliations. They're under Zenith now, so they're under Robert Drysdale. So, like, damn, one of the greatest jiu-jitsu practitioners of all time, right? Like, pretty big deal for them. And like I said, their school came up from like really nothing. But that was the day when I got tapped out like that I really got hooked and knew that I was going to do this. So I started training there. They're just like lending me a gi. And I remember I ordered a gi and I was like, all right, I'm going to have a gi. They said it would be like a month or two. And then I ended up getting an internship where I had to move out to San Francisco. Right. And I was like, oh, fuck. Like, I couldn't turn the opportunity down. I wanted to do it. And I was talking to them and I was like, all right, I know I just ordered my gi and stuff, but like, can you guys just hold it here for me? I got an internship in San Francisco. And I was like, I want to keep training. Is there any way that you can like, I know it's like a ways away, but like, do you have any suggestions for places to look at and train? And they said, there's this guy, look him up on YouTube and stuff and make sure that you're okay with his personality and comfortable with that because he's his own person. But there's this guy named Kurt Osiander, and he basically runs Half Gracie in San Francisco. And I was like, damn, okay. So I look him up, and if you guys don't know who Kurt Osiander is, I'm not even going to try to like explain his personality. Just look him up on YouTube, right? He is an interesting character, very long, like curly hair and stuff, and just very straightforward. So I eventually get to San Francisco and I'm like, I'm going to try this out because we got a stipend for rent. We were living like right above the Tenderloin, and I think it was like a 15-minute walk down through the Tenderloin to his academy. And I would make that walk like 2 or 3 times a week, always during the daytime. Like, it was never that bad. The homeless just they were aggressive. They would follow you. But if you just like kept on walking, everything was cool. Like, I never really had a problem. Anyway, there would be like bum fights and shit sometimes outside of Half Gracie. But anyway, I walk in, Kurt's sitting behind the desk, and I was like, hey, I'm interested in taking a like jiu-jitsu class here. Do you have like beginner classes or anything? And he was like, no, we don't do that fucking shit here. Like, no beginner classes. You just get in and train. I was like, all right, fuck, Mom. Like, okay. And I was like, all right, so do I need to buy like an academy gi or anything like that? Like, does it have to be specifically from here? And he was like, and I needed one anyway. I was like, this would be the easiest place to get one, right? Because he was like, yeah. He's like, A3, and he threw it to me. He's like, wash it hot, dry it hot. And then that was pretty much it. Like, they took my info while I was talking to them before, got in the computer, and like, I left. So I go back, and I remember my first day there, I felt like I had gone through hell. I was like, this is fucking so, and nothing against like Clarion or anything like that, but like the workouts and the warm-ups at Half Gracie are legendary. I was just not used to that sort of output. You would go in and you would do a 30-minute warm-up, and it was not a warm-up. It was a fucking like plyometric, insane cardio. Like, I was fucking like heaving for breath. I remember you would run in a circle the whole time and then get down and do like push-ups, and you'd have to do like, I don't know how many push-ups, a ton. And everyone else would get up and run around, and I'd still be doing my push-ups, and then you had to do your head exercises from side to side, and then you had to do like fireman's carries sometimes. And I was like, this is insane. So after 30 minutes of warming up and doing all this fucking cardio, you're heaving for breath, you're covered in sweat. Then you start training the technique and learning it, right? And they come in, teach you the technique, you split off, work it, and you're working it at a fast pace. And then you have 6-minute rounds. And I remember I got yelled at for sitting out one of them one day. And I was like, oh, fuck. So I tried it, but after, I stuck it out for the summer, because after that moment, I was like, fuck, this is like very legit jiu-jitsu. Like, this is different level. Like, this is my first introduction to, I think, what a very high level academy looks like, right? And an academy that had a very tough system and a very like thorough system. And I remember vividly, there was this black belt named Jake there. And I was sitting on the side one day, and there was this kid at purple belt who would fuck me up when we rolled. I was like, I have no idea what the fuck's happening here, right? And he had gotten promoted to brown belt. And that made me feel a little tiny bit better, because I was like, all right, like, he's pretty good. But then I watched him roll with Jake, and Jake literally like danced circles around him. And that was the first moment like that I witnessed where I was like, okay, when people say there are levels to things, this is what they mean. Like, that kid is good. I know he's good. I can feel that he's good. Like, I had rolled with enough people like that were worse than him and stuff. And then this kid right here just obliterated him and made it look like he didn't know how to do jiu-jitsu. And I was like, this is like insane. Like, truly, like, your first introduction to it is probably when I get tapped out by Mikey in 15 seconds or maybe 10 seconds. It could have been 5 seconds, to be completely honest with you, right? That's like my first intro. But the intro, when you see it like at a very high level, was that to me. I was like, holy fuck, like, the potential for this is crazy, and how good you have to be and how much time all that stuff started clicking for me a little more. And I remember walking into the academy one day, and fucking Jake Shields was there. And I walked up to the guy at the desk, and I was like, is that Jake fucking Shields? And he was like, yeah, dude, we're fucking legit here. That's all he said. Like, they were just so straightforward about everything. But it was true. They were a good gym. And like, I think some dramas happened there recently. I haven't kept up with it. But yeah, I trained there for like 3 months. And it definitely hardens your like mentality. And when I went back to Clarion, I remember thinking that the training sessions were a lot easier. Not that that was bad. They have their own system going. They compete very well when they're back home. But it was just like different. I was like, damn, this is a different pace. So I was in great shape, but like, I actually don't know. I retained some things of it, like the pressure passing and stuff, and some of the things that Osiander would hit. But like, I remember being so tired that I couldn't accurately like take in any new info. Like, I remember thinking that. Like, I think there's something to drilling when you are tired, but like, to actually learn new stuff, it made it very difficult for me. I remember being confused a lot. Like, a lot. Whereas when I was at Clarion, I felt like I had the freedom to kind of work through my techniques without gasping for air. So definitely advantages to it, right? Like, that's what I mean. Like, there are different philosophies and stuff. But the way they ran their gym was just fucking nuts. So anyway, my internship ends. I go back to Clarion in like August, September. Somewhere in that range. Like, I think I went back in like September, right? School starts back up. And I'm in my last semester of school. I'm going to wrap up in December, and the place that I was interning with in San Francisco offered me a job in Richmond. So I trained at Clarion for 6 months or so, and I go, all right, guys, I'm fucking leaving again, like in December, right? I was like starting my new job in January down in Richmond. I was like, I need a recommendation for like Richmond if you have one. And I was like, this is like a long shot. Like, they're not going to know. And they were like, actually, there was this guy, his name was Keith Park now. There was a brown belt that came through our gym a few years ago, and he said he trains at Revolution Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu down in Richmond. And I was like, oh, okay, fuck. So I was like, I'll check it out. Turns out this Keith Park now guy knows my aunt very well. He was the best man in my uncle's brother's wedding, right? And I said my aunt because my aunt is my blood relative. So I'm not like blood related to like our affiliation with him, but he just knows my aunt and her husband, my uncle, very well, right? So he knows that part of my family very well. I was like, no way, this is crazy. I found that out later when I got to Revolution. So I got to turn my fucking volume off my phone. I get like 100 ring notifications a day. It's I've tried fucking with the sensitivity. It doesn't matter. Like if I turn it down too low, it doesn't capture anything. And if I turn it up too high, I get like every fucking car that drives by on the street. Anyway, I found out later that this guy knew my, and when I got to Revolution, he was a black belt, but I started talking to him, found out that he knew my family, my aunt's side of the family very well. I was like, oh fuck, that's crazy. Small world. I mean, it makes sense because like Clarion, like I said, was like 30, 40 minutes from my hometown. So he's probably training at Clarion because it's one of the only gyms in our area that has Jiu Jitsu, right? But anyway, that's how I get recommended to Revolution. And I go down to Revolution, and as soon as I walked in, I was like, I'd been training for like, 9 months or so at the time. Like I'd started back in March, went to Half Gracie's from like May to then, Clarion up until December. So yeah, like 9 months or so. And I thought I was about ready for blue belt because when I got back from San Francisco, they had gone under Zenith, right? And when they were under Zenith, they did a belt test system. And as long as you could perform the moves efficiently on the belt test system, I believe you would get promoted. I went to Revolution thinking I was on the verge maybe of in the next like 6 months or so of getting my blue belt. And I was in for a very rude awakening. The owner, Andrew, will tell you that they probably have one of the strictest belt promotion requirements in the country. I think he announced that in class before. And like I said, I haven't been all over the world or anything training, but I had trained at San Francisco in a place that I thought was a very legit gym. I watched promotions happen there. I had trained at Clarion and seen like this belt test system and stuff, right? So like at this point, not a ton of exposure, but when I moved to Easton later, which is where I train now, it even kind of further cemented it for me. I trained, granted, I have to mention the dips and the inconsistencies and all this on the way up, right? When I started training at Revolution, I would get fucked up by one stripe white belts badly, like worse than I ever had. And I was like, I am nowhere near where these people are. Like, what the fuck is going on? And I mentioned the inconsistencies because I trained at Revolution for 2 years. Again, sometimes more consistent than others, fall off, stuff like that. But I got 2 stripes on my white belt, right? And I moved, eventually I was there for 2 years and my wife wasn't able to find work. And we moved out to Colorado and she got a job like instantly, right? So like that was awesome. We moved out to Colorado. After I was at my job for 2 years, they let me transfer. So I'm still with the same company right now to this day, right? And we're out in Denver. And I start training at Easton. And when I would roll with people, I was like, oh, I'm like hanging with blue belts here, right? Instantly I noticed that, like tapping some of the blue belts and stuff. So I had trained for 2 years at Revolution, and it was a very legit gym. They competed very well. They're very well run. I can't say enough good things about Revolution. Like Revolution is where I built a lot of my base for getting my blue belt, right? Like I came to Easton with a lot of knowledge and a lot of like a system that had worked using like the Kimura and stuff like that, and just like playing certain, like the Revolution is where I started kind of figuring out a little bit what jiu-jitsu was, like, and what it actually meant, and where things started to click for me once in a while. So like that's kind of where I started like trying things and like developing my game a little bit more, I guess. Like I was a white belt, but like I said, I was a white belt for 2 years. So then I come to Easton and I was a white belt for 2 more years. Obviously COVID fucking happened, all this different stuff. So again, all these dips in my training and stuff, but eventually I got promoted to blue belt, and it was actually 2 years ago back in October. So I've been a blue belt for 2 years at Easton now, but I basically spent, like, again, granted, COVID and stuff like that knocks your training off schedule, at least for me, like, right, working full, all this bullshit, right, all these excuses. But anyway, I was a white belt rather for 4 years. So like I was a white belt for a very long time. So like I feel like now that I'm a blue belt, I will say this though, when you get promoted to blue belt and you feel like you've actually earned it, that's a much better feeling, I think, than getting promoted prematurely and then getting there and getting introduced to reality too late. Like when I got my blue belt, I felt comfortable going into our advanced classes and rolling with like the purple belts and the brown belts, like getting my ass beat, but ready for what was coming because I had been, in my opinion, at a blue belt level for a little bit before that, at least by Easton standards. And this just reaffirms the point that, man, Easton, very legit gym. Half Gracie, very legit gym. And granted, I didn't know as much about Jiu Jitsu when I was training at Half Gracie, but just like looking back on it in hindsight, even, right? Like Revolution had the strictest promotion required. I would have been a blue belt under Easton standards for sure in the time that I spent at Revolution. Like I would have earned my blue belt, I'm almost positive, based on like teaching now. And then so again, like, right, I transitioned into teaching, and now I'm able to view it from this perspective, like, okay, I'm giving these people their stripes as they take their fundamentals classes. And it's like, if you train really consistently at Easton, you might get like 2 stripes in like 3 to 6 months, right? It's a little bit lighter. Like I'm just being like, that's just the reality of that's what we'll tell you if you come in for an introduction, right? And then it takes a little bit longer once you start getting into your 3rd and 4th stripe to get up to blue belt and stuff. But like, it is a very quick, like, journey to your blue belt compared to the place that I had been before in Revolution. So anyway, I spent about 1.5 years at Easton, and I finally like get into competing a little bit, get my ass whooped in some competitions. And this is, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, I may have, but there's like 3 different areas of jiu-jitsu, right? There's teaching, there's training, and then there's competing. And competing is a different animal, and so is teaching. But anyway, I'm there for a little bit, and like, I don't know, the staff was kind of going through all these changes and stuff, and I was just like, I don't know, like we had this purple belt who taught class, and he recently got promoted to brown belt. Actually, he moved out to like California and San Diego and trains at like Logos and all that shit, so left for a big opportunity. And I don't know, I just reached out to the professors and stuff, and I was like, hey, if I'm able to like help with like teaching in any capacity, if you guys, I know it's like for purple belts and stuff, but like generally that's what instructing is reserved for. But if there are opportunities, like let me know. I'll do introductions, I'll shadow you guys. I just want to like start like getting groomed for it. So once a little bit of time goes by and they bring me onto the staff, right? Like Professor Nick and Clay were like pretty instrumental, I think, in getting me on. And I start doing some intros and stuff, and then I start teaching the fundamentals class. And partly, again, another purple belt was teaching the fundamentals class, our coach Dustin. I know you guys don't know their names, but Dustin was teaching at the time, and then he went back to school to get like a degree in IT so that he could like, you know, go out and get like a better job that allowed him a little more flexibility and stuff. So there was another opening happening, and I was like, oh fuck, this is crazy. So like I kind of got thrown into teaching as a blue belt, right? Like not thrown into it, I had asked for it, but it came sooner than I expected because of like these circumstances that came up, right? So I'm still teaching the fundamentals program now. Like I'm very fortunate and lucky to be able to do so. I'm a 4-stripe blue belt, so I'm like kind of on the verge of purple, but I have like this imposter syndrome about it, right? Like, I don't know. When it starts getting close like that, you start wondering like, am I ready for this next belt? Like, I don't know. But anyway, through just like good fortune, I guess, and just circumstances and stuff like that, I was able to get into this position where I can lead a fundamentals program, like an adult one, right? So not lead. They have a very clear direction coming down, but I run some of the classes, right? So one of the things I've noticed that is a lot different about teaching as opposed to just training is that obviously, and this is going to sound so obvious after you say it, but you don't really consider it, like when you're training, all you're thinking about is really getting better. Like you might think about what your opponent's doing and being a good training partner and stuff, but at the end of the day, the goal is self-improvement for you, right? Like you want to get better, and then that in turn makes everybody else better, but like you're focusing on yourself really at the end of the day, and you're focusing on getting better. And you think that because maybe you become proficient in some techniques, or you're good at this technique or good at that it would be easy to explain to somebody how to do something. But that is so far from the truth. Like, it is incredibly difficult to get certain concepts across to people. And you have to remember that people coming in, and again, all of these things sound obvious in hindsight, but you're just kind of like, oh, I can do that. I can show somebody how to do that. And like you start thinking that it's easier to do than it is. And then somebody comes in on their first fucking day and doesn't know how to hit like a side bridge. And you're like trying to explain to them how to do that, and they're still not getting it. And then you have to come up with alternative ways and like walk around and be like, look at me, bridge towards me. And then they finally get it. And you're like, oh man, like how am I going to, when I'm teaching a class, make sure that this person, the least experienced person in the class, is also understanding it. Not just the people who have been here for a little bit and know the curriculum in and out and like know what we're doing and have hit this technique more than once, and they're familiar with terms like guard passing, recovering guard, right? Like they're familiar with mount, back attacks, this, that, choking arms, all these fucking terminologies that we use. They're familiar with them all. But to explain it to somebody who's walking in on their first day is you really have to step back and put yourself in their shoes. And that can be hard to do. But at the same time, if you're honest with yourself, it's also like kind of easy to do. Like, remember how clueless you were when you first started. Unless you had the advantage of just being born into a jiu-jitsu family where you train from a young age and you're fucking like walk around the house in your gi all the time when you were like 2, like you're going to feel very out of place when you first start, right? So like really more than the technical aspect of things on like the way for me teaching is just like making sure that people feel comfortable and are understanding basic ways to like navigate these different positions and make sure that they are staying like they're basically learning how to move their body and manipulate another human's body. I'm not teaching them like advanced fucking knee slices. Like half the time we just cut through, right? But it's like you're building this sort of like quite literally their foundation, right? It's why we call it fundamentals. You're building these movements so that when they take off into more advanced classes, they're ready to go. And again, I'm not trying to be biased or talk shit on one gym or another, but if you look at the way that Easton does it and the program that we run, I much prefer it to the way that like Kurt Osiander does, where you're just thrown to the wolves and you're just getting your ass beat all the time, because it's really hard to get good that way. Whereas in our fundamental program, and again, not just pumping up I am pumping up Easton. I do love Easton. I'm very appreciative of what they've like let me do with the teaching and stuff like that. Like, and I really believe in the system that they have. Like I said, in my opinion, like we promote a little too quickly, but that's just based on my personal past experience. I feel like there's pretty like par for the course in terms of like comparing them to other academies, though. It's just not what I'm used to. But Easton is awesome because you come in and you do get to take advantage of taking these fundamental classes where you're not getting judged at all. You are being put in a position where you are going to be successful, like because you're paired up with more experienced people and they're showing you the ropes and stuff, and it kind of feeds into itself, right? Like all of these things kind of benefit each other. And then the student slowly gets the skills they need to start going and learn like, all right, this is how you fucking hit a knee cut in sport jiu-jitsu. Like not just moving your body into the position and getting there and making sure we have some of these factors like set up. This is like the actual technique, and now we're doing a deeper dive into it. Now that you guys know how to move your body, it's time to start developing this. And then after that, once you get to like your 4th stripe on your white belt, you can start coming to the advanced classes. And that's where you start really getting to take the wheels off and train with like a lot of purple belts, blue belts, all the way up to black, really. Like a lot of our black belts roll with us, which we're very fortunate for, I think. I think it's important that black belts train when they can, right? Like our Professor Peter always rolls. Like, and I appreciate that. Like when you get rolls with them, you're like, all right, I'm going to get beat up, but it's going to be good. You know what I mean? Like, so like I personally like enjoy like, and I try to roll with my class as well, like during fundies. Like, I don't know if we're supposed to or not, but like when I'm teaching fundamentals, I feel like I can at least go in there and give them a look that they need that's somewhat realistic, but I can also scale it back in a way that's going to let them be successful. And I feel like if I can, like a lot of people don't roll, I guess, but like my thought on it is if I can just make that difference on one person who kind of understands like how we're going about the drilling, then it creates ripple effects and it kind of goes out from there, right? And as like the teacher of the class, I do think you have sort of a, like, I don't want to say a responsibility. Like you can do whatever the fuck you want. Like you're a black belt, you can take off. But like, I do think it helps when professors roll with their students. It introduces them to reality a little bit. And one of the instructor, Andrew, the owner at Revolution, always used to say like, I think he said, I could be misquoting him. It could have been one of the other instructors. My memory's so foggy, but he said like, don't make us pull rank. Like, and that is what you learn by rolling with a black belt, right? Like when you feel a black belt for the first time, it's fucking shocking. Like I had rolled with a lot of purple belts and stuff like that up until the point of going to Revolution. And at Revolution, they rolled. Like Daniel and Trey and Andrew would always roll. And when they grabbed you, it was a different feeling, and it puts that like, it drills that respect down through the system and down through your promotion system, where it's like, don't make us pull rank. Like, don't make me prove to you that I'm a fucking, like, keep our rules calm, like keep your actions concise, be deliberate about things, and like accept defeat when it comes. I remember a couple times when I wouldn't like tap but like, don't make us pull that out. Like, just respect that it's there, and we never have to do that, right? Like, that mentality I think was very healthy, and it made for a very healthy gym culture. So yeah, anyway, that's just kind of some background on how I got to where I am. And I guess like sort of a justification, I guess, on the time that I've spent in jiu-jitsu and shit like that. And like the fact that I do teach a little bit, it's sort of justification, I guess, for making the grappling video breakdowns that I do, right? Because in those breakdowns, like I said, things just seem to be a little bit more fundamental in terms of like what's actually happening with the grappling. Mistakes are a little bit more obvious. If you're watching like Gordon Ryan versus fucking Andre Galvo, I couldn't tell you a lot of the things because I would be wrong. And there, you know what I mean? You're talking about like jiu-jitsu at the very highest level, but in fighting, it tends to get boiled down a little bit more. So anyway, this was basically just a fucking rant about myself. So anyway, I know like, like we're straying from the MMA topic a little bit, but fuck, I figure like the more that I just do this, like I said, and talk about this, I think, I think it'll just make the channel better overall if I think about this as like part of my life more as opposed to like a thing that I do. That's my fucking take on it. I don't know. But anyway, thank you guys for tuning in and listening to me ramble, and yeah, just kind of providing some background, I guess, on like who I am and how I got into jiu-jitsu. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed, do me a favor. As always, I have to ask, right? Hit the subscribe button, give it a thumbs up, comment, all that fucking shit that helps creators out. Appreciate you guys. Have a good day. Bye-bye.